not-so-subtle clue I had dropped that I needed to be alone right now. But I didn't have the heart to dress him down. "I don't think so," I said. "But I don't want to speculate yet. We'll know more once she's checked in and cleaned up." "Now please let me work, Paige," I thought. A dull brown wash of dried blood covered the actress's ruined face. What a terrible waste. And what exactly was I supposed to relay to the president about what I'd seen here? About what had happened to his friend? The driver, Bruno Capoletti, was still propped up at the steering wheel. A single bullet had entered his left temple before it destroyed most of his head. The blood on the empty seat next to him was smeared, possibly by his own body, but more likely by the killer, who had apparently shot Antonia Schiffman from the front seat. A small amount of cocaine had been found in the driver's jacket pocket. Did it mean anything? Probably not, but I couldn't rule out anything yet. I finally stepped out and away from the limousine and took a breath of fresh air. "There's a strange disconnect going on here," I said, more to myself than to anyone else. "Neat and sloppy?" Paige asked. "Controlled, yet out of control." I looked at him, and my mouth twisted into something resembling a smile. The insight surprised me a little. "Yes, exactly." The bodies had been arranged just so inside the car, but the shooting, and in particular the cuts on Schiffman's face, had an angry, haphazard quality to them. There was a calling card, too. A row of children's stickers was affixed to the car door. Glittery, bright-colored pictures of unicorns and rainbows. The same kind had apparently been left at the scene of the previous week's murder. Each of the stickers was marked with a capital letter, 2 with an A, 1 with a B. What was that all about? Paige had already briefed me on the companion case to this one. Another woman in the movie business, Patsy Bennett, a successful production head, had been shot dead in a movie theater in Westwood 6 days prior. There were no witnesses. Bennett was the only victim that day, and there had been no knife work. But the stickers at that scene had also been marked with capital A's and a B. Whoever was doing this certainly wanted to take credit for the murders. The murders weren't improvisatory, but the killer's methods were dynamic, and evolving, of course. "What are you thinking?" Paige asked. "Do you mind if I ask, or am I getting in the way?" Before I could tell him, another agent interrupted the two of us. If it was possible, she was tanner and maybe even blonder than Agent Paige. I wondered if maybe they'd been put together at the same factory. "We've got another email at the LA Times," she said. "Same editor, Arnold Greiner, and the same Mary Smith." "Has the paper reported on the emails yet?" I asked. Both agents shook their head. "Good. Let's try to keep it that way. And keep a cap on these kids' stickers, too, if we can. And the A's and B's." I checked my watch. Already 5:30. I needed at least another hour at the Schiffman property. Then I wanted to speak with Arnold Greiner at the Times, and I would definitely have to meet with the LAPD before the day was over. James Truscott was probably still prowling around outside, too. At home in D.C., I missed meals as often as not. Nana and the kids were used to it, and Jamila would probably understand, but none of that was an excuse. This had been as good a time as any to break one of my very worst habits in life, missing dinner with my family. But it wasn't going to happen, was it? I called Nana at the hotel first, and then I called Jamila. Then I thought about the poor Schiffman and Bennett families, and I went back to work. Part 2. I Love L.A. Chapter 15. Why me, of all people? Why do you think she's writing these awful missives to me? It doesn't make any sense, does it? Have you found out anything that makes some sense of this? The mothers being slaughtered? Hollywood's about to go totally insane over these murders, trust me. Mary's dirty little secret will get out. Arnold Greiner had already asked me the same questions a couple of times during the interview. Our meeting was taking place in an L-shaped glass fishbowl of an office at the heart of the LA Times newsroom. The rest of the floor was a wide expanse of desks and cubicles. From time to time, someone would pop his or her head over a cubicle wall, steal a quick glance our way, and duck back down. Prairie dogging, Greiner called it, chuckling to himself. He sat on a brown leather couch, clutching and unclutching the knees of his wrinkled gray dockers. Occasionally, he scribbled something on a legal pad on his lap. The conversation so far had focused on Greiner's background. Yale, followed by an internship at Variety, where he proofed copy and ran coffee for entertainment reporters. He had earned a staff position quickly and famously when he managed to interview Tom Cruise on the record at an industry party. 2 years ago, the LA Times had wooed him away with an offer for his own column, Behind the Screens. His reputation in the business, he told me, was for insider Hollywood stories and edgy reviews. He obviously had a very high opinion of himself. I hadn't found any further links between Greiner and either of the murders outside of the movie industry connection. Still, I wasn't prepared to believe that he'd been randomly selected to receive Mary Smith's emails. Greiner didn't seem inclined to believe it either. His focus was all over the place, though, and he'd been peppering me with questions since we started. I finally sat down close to him. "Mr. Greiner, will you relax? Please." "Pretty easy for you to say," he shot back, and then almost immediately said, "Sorry. Sorry." He put 2 fingers to his forehead and rubbed between his eyes. "I'm high-strung to begin with, ever since I was a kid growing up in Greenwich." I'd seen this kind of reaction, a mix of paranoia and anger that comes from getting blindsided the way Arnold Greiner had been. When I spoke again, I kept my voice just low enough that he'd have to concentrate to hear me. "I know you've already gone over this, but can you think of any reason you might be receiving these messages? Let's start with any prior contact you've had with Patsy Bennett, Antonia Schiffman, or even the limo driver, Bruno Capoletti." He shrugged, rolled his eyes, tried desperately to catch his breath. "We might have been at some of the same parties, at least the 2 women. I've certainly reviewed their movies. The last was one of Antonia's, Canterbury Road, which I hated, I'm sorry to say, but I loved her in it and said so in the piece. Do you think that could be the connection? Maybe the killer reads my stuff. I mean, she must, right? This is so incredibly bizarre. How could I possibly fit into an insane murder scheme?" Before I could say anything at all, he threw out another of his rapid-fire questions. "Do you think Antonia's driver was incidental? In the email, it seems like he was just in the way." Greiner was obviously hungry for information, both personally and professionally. He was a reporter, after all, and already reasonably powerful in Hollywood circles. So I gave him my stock reporter's response. "It's too early to say." "What about Patsy Bennett?" I asked. "Do you remember the last time you wrote about one of her films? Something she produced? She still produced films occasionally, right?" Greiner nodded. Then he sighed loudly, almost theatrically. "Do you think I should discontinue my column for now? I should, shouldn't I? Maybe I better." The interview was like a ping-pong match against a kid with ADD. I eventually managed to get through all my questions, but it took almost twice as long as I thought it would when I had arrived at the Times. Greiner constantly needed reassurance, and I tried to give it to him without being completely dishonest. He was in danger, after all. "One last thing," Greiner said just before I left him. "Do you think I should write a book about this? Is that a little sick?" I didn't bother to answer either question. He went to Yale. He should be able to figure it out. Chapter 16. After the interview, I slouched out to Arnold Griner's desk to touch base with Paul LeBleu, the LAPD tech in charge of tracing Mary Smith's emails. He tapped away on the keyboard of Griner's computer while he spoke to me in a rapid-fire patter. 2 emails came through 2 different proxy servers. First one originated from a cyber cafe in Santa Monica. That means Mary Smith could be one of a few hundred people. She's got 2 different addresses, so far, both just generic Hotmail accounts, which tells us nothing, really, except we do know that she signed up for the first one from the library at USC, day before the first message. I had to concentrate just to follow LeBleu. Did everybody out here have ADD? What about the second email? I asked him. Transmission didn't originate in the same place as the first one. That much I can tell you. Did it come from the LA area? Can you tell me that? Don't know yet. When will you know? Probably end of the day. Not that it's going to be much help. He leaned forward and squinted at several lines of code on the screen. Mary Smith knows what she's doing. There it was again. She. I understood why everyone was using the pronoun. I was doing it too, but only for the sake of convenience. That didn't mean I was convinced the killer was a woman, though. Not yet, anyway. The letters to Griner could represent some kind of persona. But whose? Chapter 17. How do you like your vacation so far, Alex? Having a lot of fun? I took copies of both bizarre emails and headed out for a meeting with the LAPD. The Detective Bureau of North Los Angeles Street was only a quarter mile from the Times offices. A Los Angeles miracle, given the cliché that it takes 45 minutes to get anywhere in the city. Oh, the vacation's great. I'm seeing all the sights. The kids are loving it too. Nana is over the moon. I walked slowly, rereading the 2 emails on my way to LAPD. Even if the writing was persona-based, it had come from the mind of the killer. I started with the first one, which described the last moments of Patsy Bennett's life. It was definitely chilling, this diary of a psychopath.
To A. Griner at LATimes.com. From Mary Smith. To Patrice Bennett. I am the one who killed you. Isn't that some sentence? I think so. Here's another one that I like quite a lot. Somebody, a total stranger, will find your body in the balcony at the Westwood Village Theater. You, Patrice Bennett. Because that's where you died today, watching your last movie, and not a very good one at that. The Village? What were you thinking? What could have brought you to the theater on this day, the day of your death, to see The Village? You should have been home, Patsy, with your darling little children. That's where a good mom belongs. Don't you think so? Even if you spend much of your home time reading scripts and on the phone playing studio politics. It took me a long time to get so close to you. You are a big somebody at your studio, and I am just one of the nobodies who watches movies on video and Entertainment Tonight and Access Hollywood. I couldn't even get inside the big arched entrance at your studio. No siree. All I could do was watch your dark blue Aston Martin going in and out, day after day. But I'm a really patient person. I've learned how to wait for what I want. Speaking of waiting, that incredible house of yours is hard to see from the street. I did spot your lovely children, a couple of times actually. And I know with some time I could have found a way into the house. But then today, you changed everything. You went to a movie in the middle of the afternoon, just like you say you do in some of your interviews. Maybe you missed the smell of popcorn. Do you ever take your little girls to the movies, Patsy?